heat them in the stove.
Had a lot of sawdust in it. We stored ice in the summertime and slept in it in the wintertime.
Then there was a big old shop that sat just south of that. The thing I remember about the shop was, I guess it was the first thing I ever saw anything that died. In the night he got poisoned and they shut him in there. He's laying in that shop dead. Quite an impression on me at the time. I was just a kid.
I think he was kind of ornery about killing the neighbor's sheep. I guess he probably had it coming.
You think good? A log, rough.
Yeah. Right here. You remember that?
Well, yeah. Not real clear, but I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember Dad was talking about it and said something about that they were, Nellie Larmer was a lady that lived down the road here in everything kind of apart.
Your folks living here.
Used to get
they had an old pot-bellied stove in that, well, I guess it was a big room in there. It was kind of the all-around living room, I suppose they'd call it now. And in the mornings they'd put fire and everything. It was cold. The ice bucket would freeze. The guys on it every night and back. And it was kind of a ripple in it. Hot, it was kind of buckled a little bit. It was cold, you know. The old houses, the windows were roofs in them.
Yeah, that was something that got wood for 3 stoves.
Yeah, about
here. 3 stoves in the house, huh?
Well, they say they're with a load of coal to put in there. They kept spinning until they got it stuck. We had to get the team, pull him out.
What was your daily routine like growing up? What'd you have to do in the mornings?
Well, the first thing we had to do was get out there and catch our saddle horses up to ride to school. Put them in the shed, feed them some oats, and then milk 7 or 8 cows apiece before we took off for school.
My first year of school, he was a senior, and I rode behind him on his horse. And then the next year, she graduated, I rode behind Ida Mae, which was a catastrophe. You know, I didn't get along so well on the horse. But we made out.
You rode right up the driveway and down to town and back
and
up in the evenings?
Hitching rack down there along where the creek is, parallel with the creek. And all the little horses that stand there all day in the cold and snow and stuff.
They had that hitching rack. It was just big cedar posts, about a 2-inch pipe, the full length of it, that you tied the horses to, up, about the right height to tie to.
Horses stood there all day.
Oh,
Yeah. And if somebody got your hitching post, that's usually trouble too. You know, you had your own place where you tied up. But you go out there when it's cold, and of course the little horses was looking for coming home to get something to eat.
Yeah.
Believe me, you had to be able to get on and ride sometimes. Old Joe Putney ran the post office, and it was right next door there. And he was pretty good about looking at the littler kids. He'd get up there on his porch, and they'd ride by. You could jump on behind, jump on and get on and go.
He was an old bachelor, and he had the place there where
George Courier.
Courier lives.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a bar there too. He let some of the kids, you know, if they was having trouble keeping the saddles dry, a sick kid or something, he'd take their horse in there and take care of them during the day.
Good old boys. I can't even visualize what he looked like. I just remember his kindness toward us, that he kind of looked out for us out there.
Well, he kind of puts you in mind of this old boy that is on now, telling you that you can get that Medicare will take care of your diabetes problems, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He was just about such a looking guy as that. He had a mustache.
School down here. What was that school like?
What?
What was school like down here?
Oh, the best school on the western slope.
Did you always go to school here? Or did you go to school closer to home here at one point?
No, I went down there.
He went to Idaho before they came here, though.
Yeah.
How many years did you go in Idaho?
Well, I was trying to figure that out. I think I was in the 5th grade.
You were 9, weren't you?
Yeah, I was 9 when they come here, and I don't remember when we got here the 14th of April. Of course, they let school out about the first week in May. Then, you know, they didn't keep them in there all summer like they do now. And I don't remember going to school here that spring after we got here on the 14th of April. But I can remember that the next fall when I went to school, I can't remember. I just can't remember what grade I was in. I think the 5th grade, I think, when I started down there.
I remember you telling me a story about a couple kids getting in a fight down there, and one kid hopped on his horse and shook loose a loop and chased him across the bridge and roped him. I forget something along those lines.
Well, that was Dean Lorimer and Fred Wallace. Oh, Fred, he was always in a fight, always, and they haven't changed any yet, I don't think.
So what happened?
Well, anyway, Fred was always out after school getting in a fight with somebody. He was standing there bellowing away at somebody facing him. Old Dean, his pants always kind of sat down. Old Dean slipped up behind him, put his hands in his back pockets and pulled his pants down. He turned around and run. Fred was quite a roper, you know, he always was. He beat it over there to the hitching rack to get his horse and his rope. And old Dean was on the run. And he, you know, they had that short stairway up to the road and then run on up to that Laurent's house that's on above the road.
Yeah.
And so he would have got old Dean too, only a car come by by the time he got on top there and stopped enough for Dean to get on.
I always wondered where the teachers were in those days. The minute you walked out of that door, you were on your own. I mean, you battled or you made it or you didn't, you know.
When they talk about
Nobody ever came out and ever straightened anything out that I ever knew of.
talking about that hitching rack, we always left our lunch tied on the back of the saddle until noon, and we went out and ate our lunch out there, standing out there in the Collbran old hitching rack. And Rex Clifton had an old sorrel bald-faced mare. She was one of those that pull back.
Ute.
And of course, our kid had always let a paper get loose and blow along in front of those horses. And of course, they'd all pull back. I can remember that, and she'd never give up till she broke something.
Did you guys get many fights in school?
Oh, I didn't, but there was a lot of fights.
A lot of fights. My feet wouldn't let my face take a beating. I was kind of small. I was pretty scrawny. About the time I was in junior high, there the kid had been lording it over me all the year. And I had bad tonsils, and I had tonsillitis, and I was laid up 2 or 3 weeks every winter. And just never did any good. And so I had my tonsils out that summer. And I came back that fall, and I was pretty healthy, and I was pretty husky. And this old kid, he started to me when we was in the latrine. And I just tucked to him and mopped the latrine up with him. And Harold Newsom was our teacher. He just stood there and grinned and watched me do it.
It'd be a lawsuit now, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't dare do something like that now.
Remember, there's a family that lived down here in that old log house that Gunnarsons had got. I think the old house is tore down now, but his name was Thompson. They had a big family. Chester Thompson was the kid's name. Of course, every new kid that come into town, somebody was nominated to beat up on him. So when I went to school that first fall, and then much when I got there, here come Chester Thompson to clean up on me. Of course, I lived right next door to Clifton's here, and old Frank, he taught those boys how to fight. He had boxing gloves, and he put on and hands saw to it that they could fight. But anyway, old Chester, he took to me and started pounding on me. Oh, what he come in, boy, he really cleaned that kid. So I always had a soft spot in my heart for Whitey, even if he was the hardest kid in the world.
What do you guys remember most about school?
I don't know.
You got a pretty good education.
It wouldn't go very far nowadays.
No.
Well, probably a high school degree then is worth about a college degree now.
Yeah. We had some really good teachers. I think very fondly of my teachers. My first one was, she was Miss Harris at that time, and she later married Bill Tupper, and he was a doctor's son, and they owned quite a spread of out there at the old Buckhorn, and then he got to be county commissioner for several years, and she was a fine lady. One of the things I remember would embarrass me yet, because I was just so terribly shy, and you just never been around kids and stuff. And went down there, and of course you're supposed to hold up your hand if you had to go to the bathroom. I was too shy to do it, and I wet my pants, and there was a big puddle behind my chair. She handled it very nice, but it was always something that you kind of remember as you go along. Then we went on up. We had another teacher with a Miss McMillan, I think, second grade, and Miss Ludine and Miss Sellers. Fine, fine ladies. Miss Ludine, of course, was just a permanent fixture here until she died. Even after I was grown, I met her on the street. I was a little afraid she might grab me and wipe my nose or something. She was always cleaning the kids up, and stuff. And she was bossy, but she sure was a fine lady. And Miss Sellers died over at Crawford, and she just died a little over a year ago. Had I known she was still alive, I'd have went and looked her up. She was a very large lady. Yeah. She gave us never had been to a picture show, a picture or anything. And I think about the 4th grade, she bought her a new car. And she took turns and took so many of us, and took us down and showed us a movie. And then her cousin lived down there, and we went by, and I had something to eat, as I remember, before we came home. Just things that...
If I remember, she was about 100 years old when she died.
Yeah, she was.
I think I saw it in
the
obituary in the paper.
Sure would have liked to go on and see her. I sure would have been happy.
I don't think she ever married, did she?
No, she didn't.
Quite a large, full-figured woman.
Yeah, she was. The first time she was there, they had 3 grades to teach. The 2 teachers taught 3 grades, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And I remember the first day there, she walked up the aisle, and she was big, and she says, "Am I mean or am I mean?" Went up there, and she was going to get her bluff in first. And something would happen, you know, she could grab her slipper off and paddle it behind before you could bat an eye. I mean, you'd had it. She never hurt you, and it got the effect.
Yeah, back in those days, the kids didn't run the school.
No, they didn't. The teachers run the school. Ted Brown was behind me a year in school, and after he died, his wife wrote a story, and they published it in the Platte Valley Times. I took pretty much exception to some of his stuff, and I rarely ever say anything or do anything, but he downed those teachers, a lot of them pretty heavy. And I wrote an article in defense of the teachers and put it in there because I thought they deserved it. I can see how Ted probably felt, all right. He was without a father, and his mother lived with Dell Charlesworth, and he was abused. Old Scotty beat him up all the time. That was Dell's younger son, and he was overbearing, no good. And Ted had a rough life, that I agree, but I thought the teachers deserved a better word than what he gave them.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it got so controversial, the story did, they kept running it in the paper, they never did finish it. So I called his ex-wife and got a copy of the story to finish it up.
Well, what'd you guys do when you got home from school then?
I got home as quick as I could and sawed wood until we finally got that old buzzsaw. Every night you cut wood until dark, get enough wood to last until the next night. We had one of those old sawbuck things, you know, that you laid you laid the log in and sawed wood.
As I remember, about the first thing we did when we hit the house, Mom always had us canned a lot of fruit. And we had some bread and butter and some fruit. You know, I was always hungry because you had a long day down there and just lunch. And of course, we always had the cows to milk too every night. They were always there.
How many milk cows did your folks have around here?
Oh, I'd say we probably averaged 10 or 12 probably.
Continually, sometimes up to 15 or 18. When we used to go to Low Flats in the summer, we had about 18 up there.
Yeah.
Where were they selling the cream?
I had the old creamery down there.
Just down here at the bottom of the hill?
Yeah.
Now, there was another place they used to sell, and Hicks's had a grocery store down there, and they bought cream, and if you took they tested the cream, and you took it in there, and then of course they traded the butter, the jet out for.
There was two other cream companies, or butter companies that bought cream down here. There was the Mutual Creamery, they called it. Seemed like maybe Jack Deweese's stepfather run that.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of his name now.
Graham?
Huh?
Was it Graham?
I can't remember.
Well, where did you do most of your milking?
There in that old shed.
Over here?
Yeah, you never had a stanchion or anything. You just run down and milked them. Them old cows were tough, and you had to be pretty tough. They wasn't the real mean ones. You put hobbles on. The rest of them, you just cozied up to them and talked to them and got the milk.
Was that I don't suppose you ever milked in that old straw shed, did you?
Yeah, when the water run down,
Yeah. It was when they threshed grain in the fall, they'd set the thresh machine up out here, blow the straw up on top of that building. It just had it. Just a lot of small poles and stuff across between the rafters.
Now, where was that?
Right out here where this red shed is.
The first red shed?
Get the hill.
Yeah.
That old big rock is still there. And I'll swear every time you sit down and milk a cow, there's right there on top of that rock.
Yeah. With the poles, they laid willows over the poles, and then they broke the straw on top of that.
Yeah.
It was great all winter long. It was a nice warm place and everything. But come spring, and then that was one of my jobs every weekend, and then was shovel the snow off of that roof, you know, so it wouldn't run through. But then when the rains come in the spring, it just run through, and it was wetter in there than it was outside, if I remember.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of dairy cows were they? Mostly Jerseys? Or?
No, I would say at that time we probably used more of those milking shorthorns, a dual-purpose cattle. That, you know, you could turn the cows out as yearlings on the force, you know, and have a pretty good beef check off of those.
Mm-hmm.
While they didn't produce milk like cows do nowadays, they produced enough that we could buy groceries, I guess.
Well, were the cows out in the pasture during the day then, or did they just keep them in corrals here?
You know,
What you doing?
In the pastures during the day, and then of course we had them out around the bunks and the corrals in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
And all the old bunks would get deep, right? And they wouldn't have the loaders like we do now, you know, to get the manure and stuff out. And that was another weekend thing, was try to get enough manure out of those bunks so the old cows and drag their udders in it.
And it got deeper and deeper, and so I poured those concrete things around the bunks there so you could keep them up out of it.
Yeah.
I remember Granddad Flat, when he was here in the winter. That was my job after John got married and left, when the fellow me on the weekend to clean those things out. And Granddad would come out there and help me, and he was really powerful in his shoulders, but his legs were weak, and he'd get set up just right, and he had a big old voice, and he'd get that manure fork around. He'd load you up in just a little while.
Well, the dairy products, was that your folks' primary source of income then?
Yeah, that was.
What they usually did, you lived on the cream deck during the summer and stuff, and when you sold your beef in the fall, that's when you made your payment on the place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the way it worked. If you
Mom,
couldn't stay within that, you were in a lot of trouble.
and when Mom and Joe would get that beef check in the fall, they already had the Montgomery Word catalog out, and the Sears Roebuck had all the things listed, you know, that us kids would need for the winter. That old wool, scratchy underwear that used to make us wear.
Yeah. That's one thing about the Monkey Ward catalog. You could sit down there with your figures. You had X amount of money, and you made all what you bought within that amount of money. And after Janice and I were married, we tried to buy our Christmas stuff with the Monkey Ward catalog, but it got to about half the time when you made the order, it came back and they were out of stock or something. So eventually we just faded away and didn't do it anymore. But,
and they all just had one change of clothes. See, what you put on Monday morning, you wore them until the weekend, then you had a bath for Saturday night whether you needed it or not.
Yeah.
and then you would change and put that new set on, and Mom would have those others washed, you know, for the next week.
And everyday clothes was your last year's school clothes.
Yeah.
And if you outgrowed your shoes, you cut the toes out of them so your feet could go on out. I don't know how many pair of shoes I had. Yeah, it's in summer it'd come while they was too small. Your feet was getting too big. You just cut them out. But then come school time, you got the new pair of shoes, and of course the shoes were high top leather shoes. I aren't sure weren't anything that's very classy, but then that's the only pair that you wore in everything you did, no matter where you went or what you did.
And Mom never had a washing machine until she moved to town, I guess. I don't know.
No, she had one here.
Yeah, she did.
She had one when I was a freshman in high school. She
What you do her washing then?
washed one floor.
On the old washboard. You know that if that stuff, some of that would get loose, it'd peel all the hide off your knuckles, you know, scrubbing up the board.
How'd they get the clothes dry in the wintertime? Just hang them up around the fire?
Yeah,
pretty
much.
You usually hang them up outside if the day was nice, and otherwise you'd have to bring them in.
One of the things I remember you talking about your mom moving down here from Idaho was her dismay when she got into Platted Canyon down here.
Yeah.
Do you think she was ever happy living here? Or?
Yeah, I think she was.
From the time I can remember, I think she was. I think those first years were really tough. Of course, Granddad Hill had died, what was it, the second year they were back? I was born that first year. And then our brother got killed right in there. I think they were really tough times for the folks.
It took her a while.
Yeah, I think it was.
Got her when they left out there, you know, on the 2nd day of April, the 14th of April when we got here. And Dad was gonna plan to leave the 1st of April, and he got to thinking, no better than the roadside, or somebody might tell him to go down the wrong road and be April Fool's Day, so he did until the 2nd before he left. And we'd come across that desert from Provo to
The Green River.
Huh?
Was it Green River?
Green River, yeah. There wasn't any bridges across those gulches. No, it was just straight down higher in the ceiling. They just had kind of dug outs, so you get down in and get out. And of course, that was in April. There was a little water coming off of those mountains back that way down those gulches. We'd get to one of those, and Daddy, Dad, Mom, and the kids all get out, walk across the gulch, and he'd drive the car across, and we'd load up and come on to them.
The 1916 Dodge didn't have a lot of power.
Yeah, convertible, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it had a cloth top anyway.
Yeah.
Thing would be worth a fortune now if it just left it out here in that old shed.
Yeah.
What do you do with it,
Yeah, trade it off for some calves. They're driving them arbor gas up Salt Creek, Terman and arbor gas. They got some calves for it. I guess Cliff Stanton married one of those Terman girls.
Well, your mom always seemed like a really happy lady.
Yeah.
That's some things I remember about her. What do you remember about her daily routine and what she did with her life here?
Boy, it was busy.
She was always busy. If the washing was done, the floor was scrubbed and everything there, her world was in place, And anybody that walked in the door had to fix them something to eat, a cup of coffee or whatever,
No, I never saw anybody like her, no matter who come or how many. Within an hour or so, she had a meal for them.
A lot of those old ladies were really good at that. I remember Fern Stanton. They lived up on top of the hill here, and Cliff was my age when we went up 12 grades of school together. And later years, they moved over where I lived over north on the desert, and I never saw a lady that could put together a meal on as near nothing as she could, and it was always good.
What did you eat then? Before refrigeration and electricity and some of those things came in on a little later. What was your primary diet?
We ate cured pork and chicken during the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
Made a lot of cottage cheese.
Yeah.
We used to hang it on the clothesline, make it, and she canned. Mom canned everything. And they used to go to Grand Junction and get a lot of vegetables, tomatoes, and she'd can a lot of tomatoes. And, one of the dishes she served and everything, she'd cook tomatoes and put breaded tomatoes. It was real good.
And I was almost grown until I figured out why I didn't like her home canned tomatoes. Because she always put salt in them. And I started not putting salt. I liked them then.
Mm-hmm.
Salt put the acid too much in them.
I don't know.
Well, you put sugar on your tomatoes now.
Yeah. I don't know why. It just changed the taste of them.
Yeah. Well, the outbuildings, the sheds and everything, were those built about the same time the house was built?
Well, that second shed, one next to the hill, was built the fall. Mac went away to college.
Oh.
He was working on that a little before going to college. Somebody come along, and old Granddad Flat was out there. My Granddad, he didn't think much of that guy. But anyway, that's the last time I can remember back working around the place at all.
The farthest west.
Farthest one, yeah.
Yeah.
The one on this side built the year I went to service. And Dad was wanting to get it done before I went, and I could have cared less. And
What, 94, 42 or 43? Right?
47,
Oh,
46, 47, somewhere in there.
this shed here was where you got the car. When was that built? Is that the oldest one?
It was built in 1932, the year I graduated from high school. We went up on Brush Creek and carried those poles out and built that shed.
The west part of it was for the workhorses. They used to keep 2 teams of workhorses in there. Well, of course, winter they always kept 1 team in there. Remember that one of the last teams he had that sorrel horse, and he had a sack he filled up with straw. He'd take it in there and throw it in there and kick it out a time or two before he bothered to walk in behind him. He'd get tired of kicking it, and then he would kick it.
Still don't know if I'd take that risk or not.
With that shelf thing is along there. I put that shelf in there after I poured that cement floor in there to make a kind of a shop out of it. But that was the main shelf.
On the west side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You put the hay in, and then there's still 1 or 2 of those little boxes of grain in that is nailed on each side of those stalls where you put the grain in for the horse.
And the grain, the horses, they would just be so hungry, they'd grab the grain and swallow it so fast they'd choke on it. And just go out and get little rocks about so big and throw in the grain. Then they'd have to spit the rocks out, and then they could swallow the grain, but they didn't just swallow it all at once. And I hadn't thought of that for years till we got talking about the grain boxes. I remembered the rocks was in the grain boxes.
Well, your dad must have had to grow a lot of oats around here.
Oh, we raised a lot of grain every year.
Yeah.
Mostly oats.
And that was one of our cash crops part of the time was grain raised.
Where did he grow it? Over across the creek? Or?
Yeah.
Raised a lot of barley, and bearded barley. I hated stuff. Man, it was tough on you and shocking or anything. Just raw, get you raw. But it was good feed. But they didn't have rollers in those days, and you ground it. It was kind of bad to bloat stuff, so they mixed it with the oats a lot when they fed it.
Oh, we used to seem like we always had 10 or 15 acres of grain. Of course, then we didn't have much water. We had to rely on crop rotation. We didn't have fertilizer to put on that. You'd raise alfalfa so many years and put some nitrogen back in your soil, and then you'd raise the grain, and then you could seed it back alfalfa again in about 3 years.
Well, your dad, his operation was pretty much just limited to the west end there, and this right across the creek, and over beneath the mountain.
Yeah.
That was.
And that knoll was part of it, and that old highline field was part of it. And of course, that back in that pocket there, that was just all cedars. We just had a fence on the lower side of that. We used to put old Rasputin over there.
All the horses in the spring of the year.
Yeah.
They didn't have any place to come.
There wasn't anything there for them to eat, really.
You said Rasputin. What was Rasputin?
I don't know.
So brown colt, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
And
Kind of big old long brown horse. Just as old as he could be.
Right. They sold him to the first World War II. They came in buying horses, and he passed, and they sold him, and they paid a premium price. The Army did, and he went with the Army horses.
They had to be about a certain height and so on. They didn't care whether the horse was good or not.
I don't particularly remember him being anything fantastic. I used to ride him around.
The worst trouble with this place over here, Dad run, we just had to keep plowing, to keep this crop rotation, to keep a good stand alfalfa, or you wouldn't raise anything and go to dandelions, and you didn't have much of anything, you plowed it up again. and he didn't have enough water over it because only had 15 inches of water, and that was what he got off Uncle Norman's place. Say he didn't get it, but the guy before Dad got it. Old Jim Riley made a deal with Uncle Norman. Uncle Norman got rid of all that poor ground, that knoll and that steep side hill up there on the high line, and them adobe spots out there in the east field, and he got old Jim Riley have 15 inches of water with that 9 acres, I think it was, that he sold off.
Well, that plow I ever did with horses, I was a senior in high school, and they had about 3 acres there just above that of Uncle Norman's, and I plowed it with a walking plow and the old team. And I still did a lot more walking plowing than I did. Used to go to Mobile Flat, go up there and plow that every fall.
Yeah.
You
That was
farmed up there, huh?
Yeah, we raised quite a lot of oats up there. You get on a good year and had some rain, you get a pretty good oat crop without any irrigation.
But the problem was getting anything to thrash it, and it just stacked it up there, and you stayed up there and fed it out.
Yeah.
You never
That
got
was
thrashed.
That was a lonely old vigil up there.
Yeah.
A long ways down to any civilization.
Especially when you were going with Joe. She was teaching up Salt Creek.
No phones, no cell phones,
No.
no internet.
No. Dave Strickland used to let us stay with us. And I know he got to go up there and stay with John over Christmas vacation, and I had to stay home because we had all these cows to milk and stuff. I was totally put out because I get my turn to go up there. I think you ate the porcupine up there, didn't you, that winter?
I don't remember. The main thing I can remember about Bill was that when they get done with the plow in the fall, I put that plow under that, where that window is on the end there, you know, until he use it the next fall. But anyway, old Dale, he was one of those daredevil guys. He got up one morning, there's about so much brand new snow, and it was cold, I'll tell you, the sparkles in the air. He said, tough, like my old granddad. He got out and run around that cabin a few times. His bare feet, just in his shirt tail.
Yeah.
And he come back, and I had the door shut on him. And so he was going to climb up onto that window thing. We put that window thing down so we could. That was our cooler, our refrigerator up there. And he was going to jump up on that plow beam and climb up over that and get in through that window. He stuck fast. those wet feet. I'm more ashamed of myself about that than anything I ever done. I don't know how long it was getting him loose. I had some warm water in there on the stove. Kept pouring that on that plow beam.
Did he lose his skin?
No, I don't think he lost much.
He was killed in Italy in World War II.
Was he?
Thinking about that window, one time John and I was up there, the cabin, we'd been milking cows up there, I guess, that summer, and we were standing there looking out that window, and a bolt of lightning just came right over the cabin, hit, and you just smell the brimstone and see it bumped out across the ground. It knocked him about half silly. It didn't bother me, man. I was just scared to death because he was just kind of numb from it, you know, for a little while. So down there, and he got over it.
I think you're just a little bit mixed up on that. We were driving those cattle up.
No, that's another time. That's
That was another
we about got it up there.
Yeah.
That's another time, yeah.
But anyway, Cliff said, I feel kind of funny, you know, with lightning cracking all around us and hail a little, the wind blowing, and boy, that crack of lightning, and we only had a little bunch of cattle, I don't know how many, but anyway, knocked 7 of them down and killed one of them. So we cut his throat and butchered it out. But I can remember, and Cliff says, well, what do you feel like now? I said, I feel grateful to my Creator.
Grateful what?
To my Creator.
Yeah.
Well, the only reason that I wasn't up there was that's when the cows got hit. We were separated, driving the cows, and I had a little bunch of cows, and he had a little bunch of cows, and he was behind me. And I went back, and I sat down on a rock and waited for him to catch up. And if I'd kept on pushing him, I'd have been right up there with that bucking hit. But I sat there, yeah. That was the second time. That's twice that we were up there about got it.
Well, that low flats is kind of bad for lightning anyway.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
You know, a lot of this high country is back our camp there, Plateau Creek. One time waiting over back in there, and one of those hit, and man, it was just all worse. And I told him, I said, turn that old mare loose and hang on. And we hit it down out of there just in the long run. Probably nowadays I wouldn't have gone that fast. I'd be worried about the horse fall down, but I wasn't worried about it then. We just took off down through there.
And the only time I've heard people talk about it, when that lightning is back, there's bowls on the end of the horse's ears, that lightning. Mm-hmm. And the only one time I was up there with Lewis, and we got into lightning. It was that bad.
It's a scary thing.
Horse's mane stand up a little bit.
Just dancing on the ground around you, boy,
Yeah.
and you can just feel it and hear it.
Yeah.
You know,
And just a ball of fire right on the top of their ears.
Just is that the static electricity build up?
And I don't know.
You know one thing, you don't want to get out of there as soon as you
Yeah.
can.
What you? How many months a year were you up there on low flats then? By the time they gathered till what, early November or mid-November?
Well, we usually come down and then took the cows back up.
Hello? Yes. No. Okay.
So I said, huh? He said, you gonna spend me $1 million? I could sure use $1 million. They'll hang up.
Yeah. There's one thing about getting a little older, you can always play the senile out if you're all else fails.
We were talking about how long you were up there at low flats every year.
I always usually come out in February.
Really? That long?
Boy, it was a long trail out of there. The only trail I had where I was going in on horseback out of that lower corner and down across the creek. And then string out there for half a mile or so, just single file.
Snow got pretty deep down to the willows, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, I got deep.
And you were telling me one time you had there was like a marten or a weasel or something that was.
And that weasel stayed in the cabin with me.
Yeah.
Oh, at night, I'd roll the bedding back so that kind of warm up in there. Man, it was cold in that old cabin. Setting up off the ground, you know, and throw a cat through the chicken on it. But anyway, I'd throw that bedding back and I'd lay down on the bench. Oh, I know we didn't have many chairs up there, we just sat on a bench, and I'd open that oven door and put my back towards that oven, you know, and lay there at night, that old kerosene light, and that weasel would come out, you know, and come up over that bedroll. His eyes just sparkle in that light, you know. He just romp and play like a kitten. And if I'd move, boy, he'd just duck like that, and he wouldn't show up again maybe for 5 minutes or so, and he'd be back again.
The summer we spent up there on the old Calvi place, they had a cement floor that was all broke up, and an old weasel had a litter of little ones under there, and she stayed there in the cabin with us all summers. She'd come around and she'd pick up scraps around, and there were bats in the tops, so it was kind of the bats were around at night, and the weasel was around some in the daytime.
Well, who built that cabin? What's the story on that?
Longfellows, the people that homesteaded the place.
Okay.
Those are those fire-killed logs for fire went through in the fall of '81 when the Indians set everything on fire.
So those are from the fire, huh?
Yeah. Those are all just fire-killed logs.
I gotta move.
You gotta leave.
I gotta move.
Oh, yeah. Turn this off.
I can just. There's so long in one. Well, you can go ahead and talk to him. I just can't do it. My hip joint, I'm probably gonna have a new one someday.
Do you have a new one in there now?
No. Couldn't get anything new I can help. But I can only drive about so long too. I set just right down there.
You did quite a bit of hunting up there, didn't you? Kill the time?
More than I should have, probably.
Yeah. Was it legal?
No, not always.
Yeah.
I remember my first hunting trip with you and Ivan Camel.
Oh.
You remember? And we went up there and saw that wall.
Yeah.
And I said, what was that? Old Ivan said, pigs, Cliff. Why don't you get your sow and get your start? And they sent me back to milk the cows, and he and John pursued the elk, and I guess they got it. I don't remember. I believe he said he took his shoes off and packed it in his bare feet.
What was the advantage of going barefoot?
Noise.
Noise.
Yeah.
Up there on Porter Mountain?
No, Lowell. Well, yeah, we called it Lowell Mountain.
No.
There's one fall when I was plowing up there. Boy, no, that was tough plowing. That ground was dry and hard, you know. Just throw it out in big chunks. Anyway, I was plowing, and old Ivan come over there. And that was when they just had one hunting season. It lasted from the 12th to the 15th of October. That was the only hunting season they had.
3 days.
Yeah, 12, I think that included. I think there was 4 days probably. But anyway, I don't know. He was acting so innocent. He looking for a cornerstone out there in the middle of the pasture. And pretty quick he come riding on over there to where I was. And he visited a minute and he said, "Well, that old bay mare pack?" I said, "I don't know. I never did try." "Well," he says, "bring her over this afternoon." So I did. I didn't plow that afternoon. And anyway, he'd gone over there on Hightower Mountain there at the up in the Cannon Draw the day before. And he'd killed 2 cow elk. And then both they were real tough about those elk back in those days too. They're trying to get them built up. There wasn't any. But anyway, he had his nephew, Raymond Merrick, up there with him. He was a kind of a funny kid, kind of afraid to walk before he'd fall down, you know.
Nowadays he'd be a computer expert. He was smart.
But then they each had their saddle horse, and I had my saddle horse, and the old bay mare had a blind bridle on her, so she couldn't see what he was loading on her, I guess. Anyway, along in the middle of the right, soon afternoon, I went over there and I couldn't imagine, of course, I didn't know what he had killed then. Didn't know what he was up to. But so we got into that bunch of Quakers and had to wait till dark to load those elk and pack them out. And they drove up to him, or they rode up to him. He'd put them up on down logs so they cool out good. And I said, and I had never seen elk before, maybe 1 or 2. Of course, they had cow elk has that mane like a bull. I said, "Bulls, huh?" Old Ivan says, "I'd say them muley bulls." He said there was only one bull in the bunch. Just well get something fit to eat, he said. sit around there and boy, shooting around above us up there. And every time a chipmunk would run through the dry leaves, it sounded like a horse coming.
Yeah.
We had them loaded up, and then they were drilling those test holes out there at the lower end. And on Hiddle's place then, they had a drill rig up there. We had to come out under those up that creek with those guys, with those elk that night.
What's that, old Fanny?
Huh?
Old Fanny, the old bay mare?
I don't remember. Probably was.
Yeah, I rode her a lot of miles.
Been so many horses around.
I'm kind of I can remember people's names, horses' names and stuff back, like the one talking about Rick's Clifton and pulled back, her name was Hugh.
We had that one old mare that you put a halter on her, she'd pull back until she broke something. If you'd leave the blind bridle on her, she'd stand there and just take the bit out of her mouth so she could eat, and she would never pull back if she couldn't see behind her. I forgot what her name was.
How many years did you stay up there in the winter? Up on
About 3, I think.
When did your dad buy that then?
In 1934.
That was just a
No,
place to...
wait a minute.
36.
1936.
I was going to say 36, and I thought maybe
Yeah.
I was wrong. 34 was the drought year.
Yeah,
Well,
36.
what was he thinking when he bought it?
Oh,
Was he just gonna...
because Uncle Norman didn't think it was any good. That was mostly the other thing.
Yeah,
Well, I think he just wanted the place to expand and raise more cows.
yeah.
Needed the place.
And that was that area up there where they had their grazing permit then, and
No.
no,
He applied for grazing permit and gave him 50 head.
No, he didn't. He didn't get that much.
They gave him what he got.
Huh?
50, I thought it was 50 head. They gave him a grazing permit. He did.
Yeah, they did, but it wasn't. It was only 20 or 25 head, and then he gave me 10 head over on Platte Creek, over on Leon Creek, and then I traded around. I think I only got 40 head when I bought the folks out, counting the 10 head that I had.
I thought that was more than that.
your dad, he was kind of hard-headed, I guess, and
Who?
your dad.
Oh, that's putting it mild.
Very wild.
What was it like living with him? Just tell some stories about him.
But his motive was the best. He came up the hard way, just an orphan boy, you know. He had to be tough with people. And, you know, I never appreciated what a smart man he was until I was 50 years old.
In what way?
Oh, just like building his house. He went up there on Grand Mesa, got those logs out and skid them into old George Strickland's sawmill and had all that rough lumber sawed up. Just what he wanted, you know. And then we hauled all the gravel out of the creek down here for the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Old Primo Canary, old Arthur Ball. And I hauled all that gravel out of the creek down there. You just brag on that old kid. He was a big husky kid, and brag on him a little. He had a show about that wide. Boy, he'd sure loaded up fast.
Well, old Tex and Holiday dug the basement pretty much here.
Yeah, but that's when they dug the basement. But I don't remember old Halliday helping on the gravel at all.
Oh, yeah, he was quite a worker.
You did all this with horses, didn't you?
Yeah, horse steam scraper.
Multiple teams or just one team?
Oh, had two teams. One of them get the sore foot, they'd walk on their knees.
He never shod the horses much.
You know, especially the workhorse.
Well, how long could a horse go in this?
Oh, and we just let them rest a day.
Yeah. How much rock could you scoop out with one sweep through?
Oh, it depends on what you get in that slip scraper about that wide, about that long, you know. It had handles on it. That's what it leveled all these gulches, you know, over across the creek. That old slip scraper.
They built the cedar ditch up there
Yeah.
on the Salt Creek. Spent many a day only in the slip scraper. That drove the team.
Did you just walk along behind it then, or how did that work?
You walked behind it and held the two things, and then
You had to,
when you got it full, you just kind of tipped it up and so and dig to where you wanted, and it
Just
yeah.
kind of,
and you
flipped
flip,
it over. There was an art to it. Boy,
just
it
kind of
could
like a
kill you if you
sled or
didn't learn how
something?
to do it.
Was it like a sled?
well, it was, I don't know how to explain it, just like, well, just like a bucket on a loader. It was really what it amounted to.
I've got one of them somewhere.
Yeah. I don't think I've got any around here. I one of them enough that, in fact, I helped Uncle Norman scrape those banks down over here with a slip scraper.
They had wooden handles on each side, and you could raise out about that wide, you know. And as I was little, it seemed like it was awful wide to me because I was always small. I didn't weigh 120 pounds, so I was 30 years old. Every time we got anything from the nurse at school, it was malnutrition. Don't know how it could have been as good as Mom cooked, but I was always pretty skinny.
But we're just going down the hill like we're skirting the gulches in. Yeah. Those old horses, they really get smart, you know. They start down, you know, to choke them a little. And you have to have a hold of those handles, or boy, they'd fly into it and throw you over the top of them.
Yeah, left, right in their heels.
Well, how long did it take them to dig this basement out then?
Oh, God. 30 days, I suppose, didn't it?
Wow.
Yeah, didn't it take 2 summers at it,
Oh,
pretty much, in between work.
no, I think we got it all done in one summer.
Yeah.
I got a truck.
I was a freshman in high school when the house was finished and when we moved in. I may have graduated the year before. So I was the only one home. John and Joe lived up Salt Creek.
They sure got the basement floor nice and level, the wall straight down there.
You know,
That's amazing.
it is. And, you know, he didn't have anything to work with. He just had his own hand saw. He didn't have a power saw at all. Didn't have electricity.
Every nail had to be pounded in by hand.
Yeah, every nail. And every cut had to be sawed to that. He had a long trough thing, you remember, you know, that he had cuts in it on each side, you know, at the different angles. He wanted to cut a rafter, and he just put it in there and saw it off, so it'd be right.
Yeah, you got that thing from Ernie Winston. That, what did they call it?
I,
Miter
Miter box.
box.
yeah,
And I guess Matt got it, as far as I know.
I don't know.
So,
But I know when he was building this, he just had that trough thing that he was,
oh,
that he, you know, was cuts with.
oh.
Well, where did he get his blueprint for this? Is this his own design, or?
His own design, definitely. And you know, he figured out he made use of every inch of it. There just isn't any waste space in it.
Yeah.
He even to the stairway. Put one stairway on top of the other.
Yeah.
The only mistake that he made, and I guess that he made, of course, he couldn't have kept it on regular footage. Was at the bottom of the stairways. They had to stick out just a little ways in that hallway. in order to get the stairs at the recommended uh, steps up on.
Yeah. I know upstairs there's a little small step to
Yeah.
the top there, but that's not too bad.
No, he figured it all out. He was,
Where'd he get all these windows and doors? Where'd those come from? You know?
they had a fellow work down here at the Collbran Supply, a fellow named Earl Fleming, that built the windows.
About out of tape here.